Imagine if you were addicted to a game and played it for 10 years just to reach the final boss room. And now, upon arriving, you discover that it was a test. A test to determine if you are truly deserving of participating in that world. And now, you have become the barbarian you chose to complete this game. This is the story of our protagonist, a guy who has always been very weak and spent much of his time in the hospital. He has always been addicted to game, much like me. But he was getting frustrated because good games weren't being released as they used to. Finally, he stumbled upon a forum where a new game was being discussed. It was said that, unlike other games, this one forced the player to do 100% of all the work. Dungeon and Stone, an indie RPG with 2D graphics. Initially, the protagonist wasn't thrilled because the game was only available in English, but since it was free, he decided to give it a chance. When choosing a character, there were the classes human, dwarf, elf, barbarian, and furry. There was also a class with 3 question marks that the protagonist didn't know if it was an option to choose randomly or if it was a secret character. The protagonist ended up choosing anyone since he didn't expect to play this game much, and ended up picking the barbarian. Looking at the game, it seemed pretty crappy, but the protagonist got hooked to the point of not even realizing the hours passing. A complete addict. In this game, there are both unique classes and classes that are total garbage. You also have to ally with an NPC, and when you die, you have to start all over again. In the beginning, it was kind of cool, but then he just kept dying and dying, getting frustrated. But he didn't give up. He started playing in the hospital, then became a civil servant, even graduated from college, got a job, and throughout all this time, he always played Dungeon and Stone. Yet, he kept dying.
9 years passed.
And now, finally, he reached the final boss room. He made it to the Abyss Gate, of course. The protagonist was overjoyed with this achievement and celebrated a lot, even asking if anyone else had reached where he had, considering he sacrificed 9 long years of his life for it. Now comes the burning question: enter the boss room, yes or no? And when he selects yes, because obviously he's going to enter, right? The guy spent 9 years grinding, giving his life to the game. Is he really going to say no now? The game warns him that he might not come back, asking if he's sure he wants to enter. Of course, this just adds more intrigue, making it seem like the game is a bit threatening, you know? After selecting yes, the game starts loading, and the protagonist starts thinking about how the boss will be. Finally, the game notifies him that he has reached the abyss, that the tutorial is complete. The protagonist is dumbfounded that the game treats this as a tutorial and starts getting frustrated again because now the game is written in Korean. The protagonist really seems like the class he chose at the beginning, pissed off at everything. He truly looks like a barbarian. After the game does the user check, lights start emanating from his monitor, lights that covered him and made him feel a lot of pain, and he was completely engulfed by the monitor. His consciousness was fading away. Congratulations, young warriors! Today, all of you will leave this sacred place and become true warriors. It was at that moment he realized everything had changed. Torches instead of light bulbs. Wherever he looked, there were handsome, muscular barbarians. Moreover, there was an old man shouting for them to grab weapons that suited them best. Instantly, the protagonist starts questioning if this is the introduction of a game. His body seems fine, but rough hands, hard muscles, and tattoos. This movement, the gamer protagonist had truly become a barbarian, until suddenly, the old man starts speaking again, saying that those who are called should step forward. He begins by calling the third son of Van and Carrick. The young man approaches the old man and ends up choosing a weapon, a double-headed axe. With this, it is announced that he is now a warrior. The next to be called is the second daughter of Fenelin, Einar, and so, little by little, they chose their armaments. May the grace of Rafdonia be with you, young warriors! And only then did the protagonist understand that he is truly inside Dungeon and Stone, a barbarian, the class he had chosen, the class he was playing just a moment ago. That's what he has become. While he wonders how this happened, someone says it can't be true. Tarzan, completely scared, says they are in Dungeon and Stone. He just wants to know how they ended up there. This led the protagonist to understand that this guy is different from the other barbarians. It seems he wasn't the only one to enter this game. Who opened their mouth? Was it you? The protagonist, completely shocked, shouted that it wasn't him, even getting angry with the guy who actually yelled. And when the dude looks forward, so it was you. Tarzan quickly started asking if they are in dungeon and stone. Don't say anything more. The old man stepped right in front of him. The son of Kajra Orm has been possessed by the spirit of evil. Erase from your memories what this spirit said. Let's continue with the ceremony. With just that, the protagonist already understood a lot. Information number 1. People like him who entered the game are spirits of evil. Information 2. You'll die if someone finds out. And the third information is that his head could have been rolling on the ground right now. Fourth son of Senek, step forward. All this situation made the protagonist soil his pants, as one by one the others were called. But the question here is, the protagonist doesn't know his own name. As more and more people were called, the protagonist came up with a plan. He must move 2 seconds after someone's name is called, and no one moves until son of Jandel, Bjorn. 2 seconds had passed after the name was announced, until finally the protagonist decided to step forward. And we also discovered that his name is Bjorn, son of Jandel. And we have to agree, right folks? This game is on hard mode. The protagonist steps forward, faces the guy, both glaring at each other angrily. The old man instructs him to choose any weapon he wants. Man, this old guy here is really starting to look like the future villain. There are various weapons for him to choose from, and the chosen weapon. Even the old man looks a bit suspicious when he sees it because it's literally a shield. This is the best option according to the protagonist. Meanwhile, outside, the computer was updating itself, increasing the overall level of the object by +24. The information was sent to the administrator. These are your current statistics. And so, according to the protagonist, when he first picked barbarian, he chose the great sword because it was insane. However, there was a big problem. He kept dying like a piece of crap. Even the monsters were confused, and he just kept dying and dying. So, he tried two-handed axes, maces, hammers, anything he could, but in the end, it was always the same. He entered berserker mode regardless of the weapon and died again. Then, one day, he was walking through the city when he spotted a shield. The shield is something else. Barbarians are a class with great vitality and strength, excellent for being a tank. In the beginning, it was challenging since he spent time learning skills because of the shield, but later on, the stronger monsters fell before him, and he was literally unharmed. In other words, this was a completely overpowered class. That explains why he chose the shield before. Now that the ceremony is over, the gates have opened, and the barbarians must go straight into the labyrinth. The city where the labyrinth is located is called Lapdonia, and with the leader's order, they headed inside, everyone running desperately together. However, whether they know where they're going is another question, right? Until suddenly, the guy who was leading everyone turns around out of nowhere and says he got lost. Everyone gets pissed, which leads the poor guy to resign from the temporary leader position. So Einar, the second daughter of Fnellen, takes over leadership. If you just look at her face, she seems like a normal waifu, but if you look at her whole body, she looks like a wardrobe. The protagonist just observes the situation until she announces that she got lost too. She looks downcast, and the protagonist starts thinking that it can't stay like this, but he also can't stand out too much. Then he pulls her aside. Where do you think he's going armed at this time of night? It's only then that she understands what the protagonist meant, and she rushes to tell everyone that she now knows the way to the labyrinth. Sometime later, they indeed found the entrance to the labyrinth, but the protagonist began to wonder if it's the right decision to enter now. He was seriously thinking about leaving the barbarian group. He had been sick his whole life in the other world and never picked fights, so can he really go in and kill monsters in there? Well, at the very least, he has to pay the game taxes since Dungeon and Stone has that system. In fact, after the age of 20, those who don't pay the taxes are literally killed. One way to earn money is by entering the labyrinths and fighting monsters. Another way is to have a humble job, working in bars, markets, etc. However, there's a small problem. He is a barbarian, and barbarians have a reputation for being wild and destructive. This is due to a game setting, but in return, they receive weapons right from the start of the game. The problem here is that the labyrinth opens only once a month, and now, literally, there are only 10 minutes left before it closes. He's kind of trapped until this time. Then, it's she who pulls him, telling him that they have to enter now as the portal is getting smaller. He just tells her to go ahead, and he'll catch catch up. But before going, she thanks him. He says it's not necessary, but she says she wants to know how she can become as wise as him since she has never seen an intelligent barbarian like him and wants to be like him. Well, she pretty much has to be born again into another race, right? But as he doesn't want to be mean to her, he tells her to think and act normally. She happily thanks him, saying that if he comes back alive from the labyrinth, she will reward him. And hey, folks, could it be what I and you are thinking? Is there going to be some barbarity between them? However, what stuck in the protagonist's mind was coming back alive. Barbarians in this game are not afraid of death. They don't care about it. So, the protagonist asks if she's also afraid of dying. She thinks for a moment and asks if that isn't obvious. Of course, she's afraid, but they are natural warriors. If you don't know how to fight, bad luck. This kind of made him understand that he will have to go into the labyrinth. So, that's it. They'll see each other inside the labyrinth, or not. But being a barbarian, he learns to overcome fear. And now he's heading inside, right folks? You entered the first floor, Crystal Cove. Oh, and I'll let you know, the protagonist is not a crybaby, okay? He's a man of few words. Now inside the dungeon, he literally can't see anything. And when we talk about dungeon and stone, the protagonist is a veteran. That means he knows there should be crystals on the walls that illuminate at least some part of the past. So he realized he ended up being sent straight to the dungeon of darkness. And this was something that had never happened to him in his 9 years of playing the game. So the guy starts to walk and feeling the walls. Slowly, he moves, leaning on them. And just when he thinks he's going too slow, the guy fell into one of those bear traps. Man, that must hurt just a little bit. The guy almost bit himself in pain, but he had to stay silent since the enemy could be nearby. And guess what? The protagonist was not wrong, right? Look at the little devil lurking there. The worst part is that they are sneaky. They only come at you when you're weakened enough. The protagonist starts removing the trap, complaining that they should provide leather shoes, not sandals. But then he gets mad at himself for complaining and at the same time starts shouting for them to come at him. That's what he wants. He stands up even though he can't feel his leg because of the trap's poison. He gets even more pissed, calling the goblin for a fight. In fact, he starts getting desperate, insulting the goblin. And the worst part is that at that moment, the protagonist heard the creature's footsteps. What led him to understand that insulting the creature really works. So, he decides to pretend he's fleeing. He walks, the creature walks. He stops, and the creature stops too. Seeing this, the protagonist decides to change plans. He falls, and falls literally with everything, just to trick the goblin. The creature stays there from a distance, just watching. Did he really die? I was thinking, what is the creature going to do, you know? And the rascal starts throwing stones at the protagonist's head to see if he's alive. And obviously, this already gets our barbarian completely nervous. And I think this goblin throwing stones is smarter than the other barbarians lost trying to find the labyrinth, until the goblin gets closer, and the protagonist makes a big mistake. He misses the blow, and even worse, he sees the goblin laughing, mocking him. Then, his blood boils, and his body even starts moving on its own. He hits the goblin. That must have completely blown the poor goblin away. And folks, this is the true strength of a barbarian. He is completely insane. The goblin had been lifeless for a while, but with bloodshot eyes, he continued pounding the goblin. By defeating this goblin, he gained +1 XP, and slowly the little creature's corpse began to disappear, just like in the game, leaving behind only a small crystal. This is used as currency here in Dungeon and Stone. It's a 9th grade magical gem, and its price is exactly that of a piece of bread. Now it's clearer than ever. This is truly a world with dungeons and monsters, a world with familiar landscapes and different game races, all things he knows very well. This is the game he played for 9 years, but if this is his new reality, he will only know if he dies. And with this trail of blood, it doesn't seem too far from happening. And I have to admit that chapter 4 of this work was just that. The guy crawling around, losing ketchup everywhere. He must have dragged himself for about 10 miles. I know there was a moment when he even saw a light at the end of the cave and started going crazy alone, probably because of the ketchup loss, right folks? And when he was almost giving up, he spotted a group which actually spotted him back. At this point, the protagonist was almost dying from hemorrhage, and as he's left with less than 2% of life, he gained 1 permanent sanity point. So, the protagonist is there trying to speak but can't because he's all broken, and the guy wants to know if he's a beginner. But it doesn't make sense for a beginner to have arrived before them there. The protagonist starts getting pissed, even wanting to punch approach those who are helping him, but the guy remains calm, even giving a little smile. But in reality, he turns around and asks if Urshan can heal the barbarian. The protagonist thinks, do they have a priestess in the team? Now I'm saved, right? But the darn Urshan simply refuses out of the blue. The guy who seems to be the leader of the group says he was already expecting that, but then he asks another member for a potion since he has many. The guy just asks if he doesn't have any more divine power, but he says they can sell the use of that power outside and give a potion to the barbarian. And here is the potion. The guy just warns that since it's not divine power, it's going to hurt a bit, and the protagonist just wants that potion before he dies. So the guy pours the potion on his rotten foot, and due to the healing effect, the body begins to regenerate quickly, but along with that came the pain. The protagonist starts screaming in pain, but not long after, the man's foot was as good as new. He even managed to stand up already. But obviously, all of this didn't come for free. The guy now wants information on how a beginner ended up here alone. Did he happen to find a secret passage or something? But according to the protagonist, he has no idea. He simply appeared in this dungeon. The paladin says he has read about it in some book, but it only happens once every 100 years. Then the protagonist realizes that he's kind of unlucky, right? And after gathering all the information, the guy says he doesn't need to pay for the potions, as time in this labyrinth is money. Of course, the protagonist finds it strange that they are investing so much time in him, and it's certainly good to have survived. The guys then proceed in the direction the protagonist came from. You can tell by the trail of blood, right? Until the potion guy says the barbarian is lucky, but the blonde guy says that he went through all of that at the beginning of the game and is lucky. The woman says that the red-haired guy didn't want to use the potion, so it was the little blonde leader who saved the protagonist, and he doesn't deny it, but he says that the priestess thought the same. Just with that, the atmosphere got tense, and after a while of exchanging not-so-kind words, they began to question how far the barbarian's bloodstains go. The archer starts wondering if it was really luck for the barbarian, but then they continue on their way until they finally stop, because what they've just found is the portal to the second floor of the labyrinth. This already cheered up their group, and when they were about to enter the portal, the woman tells them to wait a bit, and she points, asking if that there isn't the barbarian's sandal. The old man, completely excited, uses a light magic and casts it along the path they were coming from. You can see that the blood trail continues in that direction, guys. Everyone was in shock. The old man only asks the guide how far they've walked since they found the fallen barbarian, and the blonde guy says it was fucking 10 miles away. Only then did they understand that if the guy crawled alone for so long, he has the body of a monster. The redhead started trembling just thinking about it. If it were him in that place, could he endure all that? In fact, he remembers seeing that the barbarian was extending his right hand, and after that, he showed a magic gem. So, even while crawling for so long without knowing if he would survive, he never let go of his bargaining tool because he wanted to live. He had nothing else. The redhead immediately takes back what he said about the barbarian and even asks, what was that guy's name again? Everyone might think that barbarians are just dumb, crazy people who only think about killing. But that guy there is quite different. Back to the protagonist, you killed the goblin. He was tearing the creatures apart, using only the shield and his fist. He learned the goblin's patterns, spreading traps along the way, and even if they came from behind, the protagonist would turn around and defeat the goblins with the club. There was only one problem in all of this. He was hungry. The tribe leader had even given him a bag with food, but it was torn. In short, dragging himself around like that wasn't a good idea, as he lost 5 out of the 7 loaves of bread he had. He starts thinking that he'll have to ration what's left, and the boy is kind of rough in size, right? He eats all the bread and says it's very tasty, but now he's thirsty. Where is he going to find water in this dungeon? This damn game didn't need to drink water before, but now that it's real life, the game is even harder, right? So he gets up and, pissed off, starts searching. After a while, he realizes that if the leader didn't give him water, there must be a way to get it. Then he hears, right in front of him, the sound of water, and there's a dude drinking water in the corner. He gets a bit closer, but the guy stands up and takes off. Then he stops to count his crystals, and he's in the 40s. For someone who was dying like crap out there, now he's doing a bit better, right? But a new problem has arisen, and it's fatigue, sleep, and currently, there are 2 ways to sleep in a dungeon. The first is just to sleep and leave fate in God's hands. The second is a bit more effective. Hey guys, let's be companions. Yes, the protagonist didn't expect everyone to refuse, which pisses him off again, although anything makes this guy angry, until suddenly someone calls him, and it's a guy all smiling named Hans, asking if he's really looking for a nighttime companion. But then he explains that it's to watch over each other while sleeping. I accept working with you. I am Bjorn, son of Jandel. So, the guy all romantically shakes his hand while saying it would be better if there were 3, and all blushing, he asks if it's really just the 2 of them. The protagonist already wants wants to rip his head off, man, but he holds back since he needs this nighttime companion. After they play rock, paper, scissors and Hans wins, he's the one who will sleep first. The protagonist, as always, gets pissed off, but this time it's because he's unlucky. Take this, it's called a watch. When the pointer is here, wake me up. Do you understand, or do you want me to explain it again? Want a drawing? You really think I'm dumb, huh? Yes, it's normal for people to have that impression of barbarians. And yes, the guy really slept like a rock. The protagonist is there thinking whether he should ask to borrow the guy's sleeping bag. He also hopes no goblins show up. With that, time passed, and finally, he woke up Hans. He thanks him for the good work and says it's now his turn to sleep for 2 hours. But obviously, the protagonist won't be able to. How can he trust this guy he's never seen before? So, the protagonist starts snoring because he's very tired. Is the guy going to betray him? He even turns his back to pretend to be clueless, giving an opening for the guy and just waits for the crazy guy to come at him. But the guy didn't do anything, and it was his turn to stand guard again. The protagonist didn't sleep at all. He starts to lose sanity, wondering why the guy didn't do anything. Then, he begins to regret not sleeping and says he needs to gain trust in the guy until he slowly starts to sleep. Man, he wakes up with a loud shout from the guy, and they just stare at each other. I didn't sleep a wink, you know? Then why don't you clean your mouth before talking? Sorry man. The protagonist lets him know he can sleep more if he wants, and he'll continue to watch. But the guy, all happy, says there's no need. He can sleep, and he'll take care of it. The protagonist thanks him. Hans keeps that sly smile the whole time. The protagonist realizes it. The guy has a good image. He offers help, didn't blame him when he slept, and even refused to switch shifts when he made a mistake. In Dungeons and Stones, the game he knows, kind guys like this literally don't exist. He opens his eyes with the guy asking if he's awake, and with a giant hammer in hand, he asks if the protagonist doesn't want to sleep a little more. Man, if the protagonist hadn't dodged, he would have been smashed on the spot. He even jumped away, and the guy couldn't believe he dodged that. I think he triggered the rage of a guy who's already not quite right in the head. Someone might die in this mess. The protagonist goes at him with total hatred, and the guy asks him to wait. Then, he hits the guy with a shield, cracking his head. He kept asking to stop, that he could explain, but in the protagonist's mind, unlike the goblins, this guy didn't go down with just one hit, so just hit him again. The guy goes flying meters away, and starts crawling just like the protagonist did at the beginning of the story. But I tell you, this time the protagonist is kind of insane. The guy keeps apologizing, and the protagonist just wants to know why he did it. The guy said he was going to knock him out to steal the magic stones. Then he starts talking about taking the shield too, and the equipment because it would fetch a good amount of money. Is that all? Yes, now let me go. I don't think that's going to happen, man. This is the last chance the protagonist is giving him to tell the truth, and the guy, scared out of his mind, says he wanted the heart. The barbarian is confused and doesn't quite understand, but the guy says that a barbarian's heart is worth a lot of money. It seems like they're being used as raw material for magical items. So, resuming, the protagonist was like a goblin to this guy. If he could hunt him, it would be worth it. But Bjorn wants to know why he only acted now and not when he was sleeping, and the reason is that he also needed to sleep. Now that I've said everything, are you going to let me go? The protagonist knows that more people like this guy will appear, so will he always let them go? The guy starts saying he's not like the others, but the protagonist just raises the shield, and this is the first one to die at his hands. It's only been 1 day since he entered this new world, and he has already killed someone. Achievement unlocked for committing your first murder plus 1 permanent mindset. And with that, the character equipped shoulder pads, and the item level increased by plus 13. Then, he equipped a backpack, expanding the inventory space, and equipped the hammer, increasing the item level by plus 30. He also put on boots. In summary, he equipped everything that belonged to our buddy Hans. I told you that guy was a true buddy. He gave our barbarian a bunch of cool items. Let's thank him, right? Thank you, Hans. You're a real friend. Thanks to him, the protagonist stepped out of primitive life. Now, he has water, medicine, and even a watch to tell the time. And here is the current status of our barbarian. Now he simply goes around destroying the goblins. This big hammer here was very useful. Around day 2, the goblins started appearing in groups. Nothing he couldn't handle. But there was a single problem here, and it wasn't the goblins. He killed them all very easily. The problem again was sleep. He would even lean against the wall to relax a bit. But at that moment, goblins always showed up thinking he was asleep. This already made him furious, saying he didn't rest for even 10 minutes. And then he crushed them all. After cleaning up, he says he's going to take a nap, but out of nowhere, a system message appears, saying he was attacked by a goblin while sleeping. There was literally a chubby one stabbing his chest. Man, he gets startled and slaps the chubby one away. The other goblin, seeing his friend zooming past him at about 80 kilometers per hour and noticing that the protagonist was kind of mad about the stabbing, ran away. Only a fool would stay. Now, dealing with the stab wound is the problem. The protagonist thought he would wake up before being stabbed, but now he has to take care of the wound, and the barbarian says the potion hurts more than the stab. That doesn't even make sense. 14 hours after killing Hans, he thinks about finding another nighttime companion like Hans used to say, now that he knows the value of his heart. And unlike the other day, everyone wants him on their team. Maybe because he's cleaner now, I don't know, but everyone who passed by invited him. However, today he's the one refusing, saying he would only join his own race, the barbarians. He no longer considers himself human. After a while of walking through the dungeon, he spots an elf sitting in a corner. She looks at him and gets scared, of course. According to the system, the protagonist has found an injured elf. The first thing he does is ask if she's hurt, which makes her even more alert. After taking a closer look, he realizes she has an arrow in her abdomen, and it wasn't done by goblins. Automatically, he asks if she was injured by humans while approaching. The girl just kneels and starts begging for forgiveness. The barbarian becomes completely confused by this, and she asks that just this once, he spares her. She has to take care of her little brother at home. Now, the protagonist starts getting totally confused because it's not normal for elves to be like this. Normally, they were cold in the game. All of this leads him to try to resolve this misunderstanding with a little smile. Don't worry, my dear elf, I have no intention of killing you. The elf was shocked. She keeps saying she knows he's a barbarian, but does he really have to do this? Could he just let her go this time? Now, the protagonist starts getting angry and questions why she's so scared. Then, he just tosses her some items to heal and says they'll talk later. And these items are the healing leaves, the ones the barbarian took from the old companion. Why are you giving me this? Do you need a reason for me to help you? I will protect you, so take care of your wounds. And of course, he has a reason to help her, as he needs a nighttime companion. And I have to say something, this wound here is big, right? Man, I think I've never seen a wound this big, but her situation is not good at all. Besides not having slept and being very wounded, she has a good appearance. It's much worse for her to find a nighttime companion than for him. I am the barbarian, son of someone, and I am Irvin. Now, the protagonist wants to know why she's so afraid of him, and she says it's because she's an elf and he's a barbarian. But what does that have to do with anything? She says they are mortal enemies, and this is different from the game since it didn't say anything about that. Quickly, she regrets it, saying that, in fact, this war ended 10 years ago, and she has nothing against barbarians. In short, she just doesn't want to fight with him. He understands that he actually doesn't know everything about this world, and hearing that he doesn't want trouble either, she becomes very happy. But what he actually wants from her is for her to be his nighttime companion. He is very tired, and she must be too, so why don't they cooperate? She thinks about it, and remembers that barbarians value their honor above all. So she asks him to swear on his warrior's honor that he won't do anything to her, and as always, this starts to make him angry. But she says she will swear too, so he accepts. But he has to make something clear first. He's not a lord, he's just Bjorn. Of course, she has no idea that this giant barbarian named Bjorn is only 20 years old. I, Bjorn, son of my father, whose name I already forgot, I swear on my warrior's honor, Erwin Fornaxai of Tertia, I swear by the name of my clan. And so, the oath of non-aggression towards each other for at least this night is finally made. He says he will sleep first, that she might feel safer that way. She says it's not exactly like that anymore, but it's okay. This time, he's the one who gives her the watch, just asking her to be careful because it's expensive. He lies down, thinking he'll pretend to snore and sleep for about 10 minutes just to make sure. But suddenly, he wakes up all startled, drooling. As always, he asks how much time has passed since he slept, and she says 2 hours. He claims it was because of the sleeping bag and the blanket that their friend Hans left. Now, he feels obliged to lend it to her as well, and she's very happy about it, eventually falling asleep. And heavy, she must have been as tired as our barbarian. For him, it feels like weeks have passed in this game, but it's only been 3 days since he arrived. This makes him wonder what happened to his body in the real world. Well, from what we remember, it was sucked into the monitor, but the protagonist has no idea. When he checks the watch, there were only 10 minutes left to wake up the sleeping beauty, and only then does he start to worry. What should he do with her? Join her and share all the loot obtained? From the third day, the game starts sending groups of goblins instead of single goblins. He says that he can easily handle up to 4 goblins, but the question here is, safety to sleep or more magic stones? The problem continues to be sleep. Then, out of nowhere, he spots 2 humans coming in his direction. They are already whispering if that isn't the elf they were looking for, and the other says yes, it is her. The blonde comes up to him and asks about his relationship with the elf. He's a bit grumpy but still friendly, saying they are nighttime companions. However, when the the blonde asks when he goes away and leave her alone, he gets completely furious and says he won't even answer. This makes the guys tremble, but he says he understands and tells them to leave. Did he understand that he was going to be sliced? The barbarian understands that she is being sought, and now it's time to wake her up. But she's all sly, asks him to wait 5 more minutes while pulling the blanket. You know who got nervous? He calls her again, and she just complains. This makes him understand that she was pretending to be asleep. Earlier, the blanket was loose, and now she's holding it. Suddenly, she feels a pull. The protagonist just pulled her and sat her down like a child. This guy is truly a barbarian. He wants to know right away why she was pretending to be asleep, and she, all sad, says that if she got up, he would abandon her and leave. In the protagonist's mind, this is strange. It's strange that she's worried about this. So, he thinks that when she opens her eyes, their deal will be over. However, before that, he asks what she has to do with those two, and she asserts that absolutely nothing. It doesn't make sense for them to recognize her like that, and she assumes they are from the same clan as the man who tried to hurt her. At least the symbol on their clothes was from the clan called Crystal Union. Right away, he understands that it's dangerous to get involved with her since an entire clan is pursuing her. But looking at her, and knowing that she is only 20 years old, just like him, he tells her to follow him so they can talk while they walk. Go for it, protagonist. I want the beautiful elf on the team. She asks if he will help her, but he says he wants to hear the whole story first, which excites the elf. Now he listens to her story. She encountered the man on the first day inside the labyrinth, and they became nighttime companions. However, she felt something strange and ended up opening her eyes. What she saw was the man coming at her with his hand in a strange place, telling her she should sleep a little more. She only found out later that this guy is the manager of a clan that does business on the first floor. Well, for me, I already need to start making my list of people the protagonist has to kill in this story, and for now, I have only 2 people. At the top of the list is this scumbag who attacked the elf. In second place is that miserable cleric who didn't heal the protagonist. For now, let's leave our list like this. Back to the elf. She says she managed to escape that day, but his clan keeps pursuing her. That's how she ended up with an arrow in her abdomen. Now the protagonist wants to know how they can track her, and it seems they use message stones to continue chasing her. Message stones are a mystical device that allows communication when synchronized before use, with a range of about 300 meters. It's like a walkie-talkie, and he realizes that if he leaves her alone, she will be captured. But it doesn't seem like she did anything wrong, so why so much insistence from them? Is it just to shut her up? She says it's not like that, and all blushing, she says that when she was running away for the first time, she threw her knife, and it happened that it seems she hit in a terrible place. In a terrible place, if you mean. There, you know? I heard it got really ugly. He couldn't even put it back with potions. Yeah, that's more than enough reason for them to pursue you. She apologizes shyly for that, but it was simply karma for the guy, right? Suddenly, she feels a strange sensation and tells Bjorn not to look back. They are being followed. There's a group behind them at a distance of 150 meters. The protagonist is impressed with her precision, and this must be the passive ability of the elves. The protagonist says they will pick up the pace and asks if everything is okay for her. She says yes, but he knows that her wound has reopened. However, she didn't complain. This strong little elf, I didn't like it. I loved it. But even though they are accelerating, the distance between them has not decreased, so the protagonist starts thinking of a plan. She notices that he is very pensive, asking if everything is okay, but he only asks what she is good at. Proudly, she says she is good at washing clothes and cleaning the house, which cools down the barbarian strategy atmosphere. I'm talking about combat, crazy girl. She says she's good with bows, with spiritual fire magic, and the protagonist realizes that this is the rarest element. But he wants to know if she has ever killed someone before. She says no, but claims that if needed, she can. The protagonist says he understands and asks if she wouldn't like to become his companion until they leave the labyrinth. But then I'll get the rewards. And me? Me? What about me? I get nothing? Okay, then I'll take 9, and you take 1. I won't accept complaints. Surprisingly, she agrees to the deal, now being only 100 meters away from the enemy. The protagonist decides to change the plan. They will take a detour and asks Erwin to summon the fire spirit, which she does, of course. The protagonist didn't expect to return to this place. The elf warns that the enemies are closer, and Bjorn asks her to cancel her summoning. Suddenly, they become visible. The protagonist knew that these guys have good tracking techniques to enter the darkness, so he calls our favorite elf and tells her to shoot to take down the enemies. She pulls her bow in this beautiful archer pose and with a cold look, shoots her arrow towards the opponent, hitting him right on the head. She thinks she just got her first kill, and the protagonist praises her, saying that if she had hesitated, they could be in danger now. Now, approaching the body. Serdin, can you hear me? Serdin, respond. Damn, we lost lost contact with Seren. He was chasing that girl and the barbarian. Everyone listening to this transmission now, gather in the Goblin District. The guy who came after Bjorn and the elf was named Seren. After checking Seren's items, the protagonist saw that he had 2 daggers, a bag full of magic crystals, and a potion on his belt. As for the clothes Seren was wearing, now it's the elf who's wearing them. The protagonist says she looks much better now. She teaches him how to use the communication item in the shape of a stone, pressing the button on its side. Repeat, repeat. Seren is no longer responding. He was chasing that elf and was defeated. They are in the Goblin District. She is with a barbarian who has a big hammer, and the reward is 10,000 gold coins. The elf girl was already in shock, but he tells her not to worry and to summon her spirit because they are going to travel through the darkness now. They head directly to the 2nd floor of this dungeon. After some time, she calls him Sir and asks if they are really going to the 2nd floor. He says yes, and she questions if he is aware that it is much more difficult than the 1st floor. He assures her that he is aware and that there won't be any problems since they are a good combination, which makes her a bit embarrassed. The truth is, a tank and a range damage dealer have always been a good combination. However, she was still hesitant to go until the radio starts playing again, with the voice saying that if they catch the elf, they will allow him to keep her instead of the 10,000 gold. Hearing this, she quickly agrees and says she will go to the 2nd floor with the big guy. Of course, the protagonist didn't want her to hear that, but he spared himself from convincing her to go. According to him, he always liked helping the needy, especially if he could mess with scum on the way. There would be no greater joy than helping while completely destroying the trash. In other words, there's no reason not to help. As they walked, she asked if he knew the way, and he said not exactly, but if they go north, they'll get there. Of course, he knows this because he played the game a lot, right? Then suddenly, she warns him to wait because there's a goblin trap ahead, and she will take care of it. Obviously, the goblins took the opportunity to attack from behind. She dodges the first one and shoots with her bow, hitting one of the goblins right in the head. The other came charging, but she was already behind him at full speed, and he went down too. This woman is impressive, folks. All cheerful, she asks how she did for the big guy, and he praises her very well, saying she is even better than he expected. Then she gives him the magic crystals, saying that as promised, he gets 9 and she gets 1, right? All cheerful, she happily mentions that if they keep progressing like this, she'll also be able to earn some and give a present to her younger brother. The protagonist, somewhat puzzled, agrees and tells her to work hard. Suddenly, the radio starts speaking again, announcing that they've increased the reward to 20,000 gold coins, dead or alive. However, as always, the protagonist reassures her, saying they won't be pursued in the darkness. Yet another issue arises. Ghouls this time, not exactly that, but more like undead. She asks if she should fight them, but he says they'll fight together this time. In Dungeon and Stone, you get more rewards the first time you defeat a monster of the same species. In other words, the more species of monsters you kill, the more you level up. This is a real opportunity for them. The protagonist goes ahead and smashes them, and those coming from behind are easily taken down by arrows. With a trustworthy companion on the team, this becomes child's play, and they defeat the ghouls, continuing north until they eventually reach the 3rd day. On the way, they spot something, find blood, and according to her, it's not from goblins. Whose blood could it be, folks? Who almost lost a foot here and even left a sandal behind? Here is where our barbarian appeared in the first place he stepped into the labyrinth, and just behind that place was the portal to the 2nd floor. Remembering that he almost died because of it, he gets angry, slamming his hammer on the ground and cursing a lot. Owen gets scared and starts apologizing, thinking it's because of something she did. He's upset, as usual, due to the bad luck he has. If he had just appeared and gone to the other side, he would already be on the 2nd floor. Meanwhile, the elf girl is crying, thinking it's her fault. He tells her not to worry, as it's not her fault, and only then does she understand the situation, expressing sympathy for what he must have been through. The surprise for him is that she really understood what happened here. However, she says she's sure they went to heaven, his friends, meaning she didn't understand anything. But okay, life goes on. So finally, the time has come to enter the portal to the 2nd floor. You have arrived at the 2nd floor, the Goblin Forest. They fall from the sky and crash onto the ground, and now they are in the northern area of the Goblin Forest. It seems there's no living being within a 50-meter radius, and it's well lit thanks to the stars. Erwin questions why she has never heard of a forest on the 2nd floor, and the protagonist explains that there are 4 portals on the 1st floor. One leads to the Goblin Forest in the north, another to the beast beast's lair in the east, another to the land of the dead in the west, and finally, the southern portal leads to the dark Rocky Mountain. Of all the places, this one they landed in was the least bad. The protagonist asks if she knows how to get back to the city afterward, how to exit the dungeon. She says that after a certain amount of time, everyone will be automatically pulled out of the dungeon directly to the city. To be precise, on the first floor, it's after 168 hours, and on the second floor, it's 240 hours. After that time, they will be pulled to the city. The protagonist decides that when it's close to the 168 hours on the first floor, they will go back there and teleport, so that the clan chasing her won't see them anymore. For now, let's explore the region near the portal. The elf girl goes ahead, leading the way and pointing out traps. The protagonist says he doesn't see anything there except leaves and stones, but then she throws a stone, and there it is. The elf asks if it was good, and the barbarian just says she did her job. After a while of scouting, they realize that even with many traps, there are no goblins nearby. They continue their exploration. The issue with the second floor is that goblins here tend to move in groups of 12, and there are also mutant goblins that are warriors and archers. So, the protagonist plans to clear the traps and expand the exploration area, always staying close to the portal, since they can run into it if something happens. Slowly, they keep doing this until she senses a presence again, this time a group of goblins. It seems there are more than 10, and they are at least 50 meters away. The protagonist asks how close they can get without being seen, and she, without the big hammer, can get up to about 30 meters alone. And it makes sense, right? Imagine Bjorn trying to hide in the middle of the bushes, you know? The man looks like a truck, whereas the elf girl can walk quietly without making noise. Finally, she spots the group of goblins and signals to the protagonist that she has seen them. After loading an arrow, she shoots with all her might. This time, the protagonist couldn't even see if she hit or not, so he rushes past her, telling her to stay behind him. He gets right in front of the green ones and starts to think that he's not getting intimidated even with this number of enemies. On the contrary, folks, he feels like his body wants to act on its own. The warrior's heart he possesses is going crazy for the battle. Then he delivers a big hammer hit to a goblin, and the creature almost took off like it was heading to Mars, reaching Elon Musk before the protagonist knew it. All I know is that the protagonist is going crazy, shielding, hammering, but suddenly he feels the danger. A goblin almost sliced his face. If he had taken just one more second, he would be without a head. Of course, the goblins don't give Bjorn time to breathe. If he were alone, he would certainly come out at least injured from here, but that's if he were alone. Our favorite elf is only in long-distance support, thanks to which the protagonist is free to play on the battlefield. You defeated Goblin Warrior +1 experience. Our protagonist earned 11 magic crystals after defeating the first group of goblins. Considering that it took him the whole day on the first floor to earn 44 of them, this was really good. The protagonist ends up giving her 2 crystals instead of 1, since he will keep the Goblin Warrior's crystal, which is worth more. They continued exploring, and as they started exploring in a radius larger than 3 kilometers, groups of goblins began to appear every 5 minutes, including now having archers with stealth abilities. Now things are going to get crazy, folks. The goblins started coming at them with everything, and of course, they were all hammered. The protagonist was hitting everyone, but he was already in the sights of the goblin archer. Did the protagonist let his guard down? The arrow was almost hitting him, but he dodged it at the last moment. Of course, he was attentive to it, and now he even knows the location of the archer. You defeated a goblin archer +1 experience. After approximately 15 hours of wandering around, they decide to take a break. The protagonist says she can sleep first this time. Of course, she already asked to borrow the sleeping bag and blanket, so after putting away their weapons, she falls asleep, probably feeling safer with the protagonist now. For having hunted for more than 15 hours, they have earned many rewards so far. They also encountered other groups as they expanded the exploration area, groups always with more than 3 people, and some even with species from another world. Of course, they just pass by each other, but the protagonist doesn't really like seeing other people. The explorers are scarier than the dungeon monsters themselves, especially now that he has a reason to be concerned. Now, on the 4th day inside the dungeon, they were battling again, resting on the 5th day, and on the 6th day, they encountered other people. Finally, the 7th day arrived, the day to leave this labyrinth, as there were 2 hours and 40 47 minutes left until the first floor closed. The protagonist's order is to start heading back to the portal so they won't be late. The elf warns that there are new traps on the way, probably because the goblins are respawning. She also mentions another goblin group 70 meters away. The protagonist immediately decides they will fight again, and there were 8 normal goblins, 2 archers, and 2 warriors, totaling 12 goblins. The protagonist is like a bulldozer running over the goblins. He kills the goblin warriors while telling Erwin to go after the archers. It seems he's hitting harder than before, according to him, due to the countless battles they've had so far. This also applies to Erwin. Now she knows when and where to shoot, as if she's accustomed to the scenario. She had mentioned 2 archers, but no arrows came her way so far. Of course, he compliments her, but he also wants to know if she took care of the 2 archers or not, so he doesn't have to worry about the arrows. She doesn't say anything because she wasn't sure if she killed the second one, and this is good because doubtful information can be even more dangerous. This leads him to feel proud of her. Suddenly, she notices something different about that goblin archer, and what they are seeing is nothing less than a goblin archer essence. The protagonist knows that this is extremely rare, as he researched about it before. He saw in forums that essences are part of the skill system in this game. Essences provide both a passive and an active skill with variable attributes. However, there is a limit to how many you can absorb, so you have to choose the right ones for a good future in the game. The drop rate for this is close to 0%. This already upsets the protagonist because he would never be so lucky to drop something like this for him. The elf asks if a person turns into a goblin after absorbing the essence, but he says no, they just gain some of the goblin's abilities. He gives the example of the guy who followed them on the first floor. He had consumed the essence of a wolf monster and could track them by scent. The protagonist lets the elf keep the essence because he already knows which essence he wants, so he can't just pick any, as it will cause trouble later. The protagonist says it's okay, but she has to promise something to him to keep it. This was something he was going to say on the first floor. Before he finishes speaking, a group of people arrives, telling them not to move. The guy immediately starts talking nonsense, asking what they are doing. The elf was already starting to explain that they were hunting, but our 5-meter tall Bjorn warns her that she doesn't need to answer them. He grabs her by the shoulders and literally throws her into the essence, causing her to merge with it. The guy who was watching this started to get desperate and angry at the same time, shouting that the essence was theirs. After the elf returns to him, he challenges them to come forward if they want to fight, asking if they can hear him. He's ready to smash them with his hammer. After that, they ran full speed toward the portal, and of course, they are not running away from the guys. The protagonist literally made the guys run. The problem is that, according to the protagonist's analysis, they also intend to go through the portal and return to the city just like them, so they will end up bumping into each other again, and it's better to avoid that, right? The elf warns that there is a group of goblins 50 meters away, where the Bjorn says to avoid them this time. Still, it seems it won't work since they have already detected them. He decides in last minute that they should go in the opposite direction, and she confirms this while an arrow was coming straight towards her face. Luckily, at the last second, Bjorn pulled her back with all his might, and it seems that this arrow is not from a goblin archer. Probably it's the guys from before, says Bjorn. According to the protagonist, the guys called the goblins, and they must be waiting on the other side. So, he tells her to use her powers because they will have to fight. She is a bit confused, but he says that all these essences have their special abilities, and the one she absorbed earlier was the essence of a goblin archer. This literally boosts all her status statistics, and adds a passive and active ability. The passive one is the poisoned arrow when using bows, which literally causes poison damage. The active ability is the thief steps that put the user in stealth mode. And of course, this impresses the protagonist. She can activate it, and even do so without even needing to say anything, just with her will. He only gives her the bag to carry because he will deal with the goblins alone while she takes care of the human archer behind them. Of course, she doesn't accept it much, but he says they don't have time and tells her to hide until he signals her to shoot the human archer. The protagonist starts running towards the goblins and begins to beat them, fighting several at the same time, defending and attacking at an insane speed, until finally, the archer started attacking again, and these seconds of carelessness were enough for a goblin to hit the protagonist from behind. He immediately turns and smashes this goblin with a blow, and now it's complicated for him to deal with the ones in front, and still without support from the elf. With that, the injuries accumulated, and the fatigue also came, until he felt that 2 arrows were coming at the same time towards him. One is from the goblin archer, and the other is from the guy with the crossbow. He realized that it would be impossible to block both, so at the last moment, he decided to block the crossbow arrow in a very stylish way, I would say. This led him to be hit by the goblin's arrow right in the elbow. At that moment, he felt it was poisoned, and started to lose movement in his arm. So he kind of had to choose between the shield or the hammer. And removing the arrow, he decided to stick with the shield for sure, as with the shield, he can still defend and attack while protecting himself from those humans. As always, he gets completely furious along the way, and the goblins even start running away from him in fear. He knows he doesn't need to go after them now, especially since he has another matter to deal with. The guys are already saying they're impressed that he dealt with the goblins alone, and of course, the protagonist always knew it was them. When the guys insult the elf, he goes crazy, challenging them to come at him, impressing them as he still has energy even after facing all the goblins alone. But even so, he tries to blackmail, saying that since the barbarian is injured, he'll let him go if he tells him where the elf is. This makes our Bjorn smile, and this makes the guys call him sick for laughing in such a situation. Then their leader orders them not to lower their guard and to think they're hunting a giant monster. However, now he has a useless arm, so it's time for him to give the signal, and the signal is something even people from this world will understand. He immediately goes after the leader of the guys out of nowhere, delivering a violent thrust with the shield against the guy's sword, which quickly made the guy call his buddy. The old samurai came slicing with great force, making the shield move aside, but the protagonist goes all out again. The problem is that now he's surrounded, and just as he was about to start wondering if Erwin lost to the crossbow guy, an arrow started coming with force, but no one there knew whose it was. All they knew was that it was coming straight at him with the leader, and since the tank of the guys defended it, this arrow must be from the elf. The tank quickly starts yelling for them to attack the barbarian, as he will take care of the arrows, and the guy was indeed defending, while the other two were attacking the protagonist from both sides. The leader hit the shield from the front, while the samurai came from the back. Quickly, the protagonist made the decision to offer his useless arm in exchange for landing a beautiful blow to the head of the leader of the guys. And what a blow it was, my friends. Even the toothless one there started complaining that he's a monster. Bjorn quickly looks back and manages to dodge the samurai's next attack. He creates some distance until something surprises the old samurai, an arrow that the tank ended up defending. However, this time, it's a fire arrow since it has the spirit of fire, which forces the tank to throw away the shield, and in the next scene, he already took an arrow to the shoulder. Now, the shield has a dent, and there's another injured by the arrow. The leader understands that if he stays there, the situation will get ugly for him, so he runs away, saying he will take care of the elf. The samurai starts attacking harder, telling the protagonist to give up. Our Bjorn gains some momentum and, using the shield to block the view, when he's very close, he lays the shield down to extend the reach and hit the samurai, but the rascal managed to dodge. However, he ended up hitting the tank behind him. The guy went flying, spitting blood. The old man gets angry and comes back slicing again, but the protagonist is calm. He just doesn't understand why this strong samurai is in a group like this, so they start exchanging blows again, but this time it's a fair 1v1, folks. The protagonist throws the shield at the old man's head, grabs him by the collar, pulls him close, and he gives the old man a little bite on the neck, completely lost in anger. That's how Bjorn stood tall, and the other two had already gone to heaven. This was a true barbarity, we have to admit. Suddenly, we see Erwin running towards the protagonist, calling him sir. She asks if he's okay and quickly tells him to take a potion, all concerned for the protagonist. After taking the potion, the protagonist says his insides are bubbling. He feels every vein in his body, and his skin is burning and itching. After a while, we see her encouraging him, saying he can do it, but he just wants to know what time it is now. She says it's 11:20, 10 minutes since he took the potion, which reminds him that there are 40 minutes left until the first floor closes. So, he quickly orders her to take off her clothes, making her completely shy. She was already undressing, thinking he must have some reason for it, but the protagonist says he wasn't telling her to undress herself but to remove the clothes from the bodies of the guys who died. After that, the protagonist tells her to forget about the clothes and just grab the items they are after. She quickly grabs the crossbow from the guy. At that moment, there were 26 minutes left for the portal to close. They ran as fast as they could, and with only 8 minutes remaining, they finally saw the portal. With just 50 seconds left, they entered it as fast as they could. Of course, the protagonist ended up falling headfirst on the other side, while she landed gracefully. While he was annoyed for falling headfirst, she was excited, saying that it was all very fun, and she thanks him for the good job. He reciprocates, and she mentions that now he can talk about the condition of the essence he mentioned earlier. Still, there's not much time to discuss it now, so they'll talk about it when they get out. With only 8 seconds left, he was trying to remember the name of the tavern, and with 4 seconds left, his head was almost exploding from thinking. In the last second, he says it's the Black Whale. He'll meet her there on the other side, and so, the labyrinth was closed, folks. The character was sent to Rafdonia, the starting city. Finally, the protagonist protagonist is back, and it can be seen that others returned as well. He just didn't expect there to be so many. No matter how much time passes in the labyrinth, when you leave, it will always be noon of the next day, and you have to adjust the clock. Suddenly, a gigantic guy starts calling for him. The protagonist remembers that this guy is Vanon's son, Carrick, and they greet each other. After that, Serum, Senik's son, arrives, and it was only a matter of time before many barbarians appeared. This makes the protagonist have a reaction similar to mine. Where did so many barbarians come from? Suddenly, the guys start going to the store to count the crystals, betting on who has more. Of course, they invite Bjorn to join the bet. The woman doing the counting said there were 41,498 crystals there, which impresses everyone. Then it's the protagonist's turn. The woman quickly starts counting, which impresses Bjorn, and when she reveals the result, it's an astonishing 182,413 crystals. Folks, making it 9-1 with the elf was easy. This causes all the barbarians to start praising him since he broke the record for the store's crystals, especially after seeing that, in addition to the crystals, he had shoes, a bag, and even a weapon. Quickly, everyone starts shouting his name, making him happy, even yelling that he is the best warrior of all. Then they started tossing him in the air while shouting his name, Bjorn, Bjorn, Bjorn! With that, time passed, and the protagonist began to mingle with the other barbarians, until he sees someone familiar from afar, our favorite elf. She's there all happy, talking with a group of elves, which makes the protagonist jealous as he is surrounded by muscular guys. When she looks at him, she gives a little wave. He tries to say quietly to meet at night, and she confirms it. But out of nowhere, the other elf who was with her asks if Erwin knows that barbarian, and she quickly says no. On the muscular side, the barbarian also claimed not to know her. The guy got angry, saying that there's no way the greatest warrior of all time would be on good terms with those cowardly pointy-eared ones. This upset the other elf. The protagonist understood that this wasn't going well. A war between the muscular and the beautiful pointy-eared ones was about to start right in front of him. After a while, when the dust settled and he was walking through the city, he started seeing families reuniting everywhere, whether brothers or sons, but there were also those who didn't return, and similarly, it was happening everywhere. It's different to see this in person than in the 2D game, but now it's time to celebrate. The muscular ones were downing mugs and mugs of beer. Even the women were doing it. Some guys were even downing 2 mugs at once, which made the protagonist rethink why he was with them. He just wanted to see if there was something he needed to learn from the barbarians, but they were just downing 1 mug after another without thinking about anything. So he stands up, angry, saying that he has to leave. Immediately, all the barbarians in the bar turn to him, asking why the protagonist is leaving, but in the end, they just wish good luck to the best barbarian warrior. Now, walking for a while, he realizes that this world is very peaceful. There were even different races walking together. So after buying some new clothes, he goes to an inn and takes a bath, thinking that if it's peaceful like this, living in this city might not be so bad. Now, coming out of the bath, our gigantic barbarian throws himself on the bed in just his underwear, and the guy is gigantic, his feet sticking out of the bed. Now we have to admit that the guy is quite a hump. I want to see the elf resist. Now, with his head on the pillow, he misses his old home, but he better get up because there are things to do. And when he woke up, it was 9:18 p.m. He left the dungeon at noon, so he figured he must have slept for about 4 or 5 hours. The next day, he asked about the tavern, and the guy said it disappeared. It seems the son got into a betting scheme 10 years ago, and then they changed owners and the name of the place. The protagonist wants to know the new name, and the guy says it's Python Pooth, where the protagonist is now, and it seems different from when she played. Already inside the bar, things seem lively until he spots Erwin calling for him with the other grumpy elf. The woman already says that he is that barbarian, but he politely says his name is Bjorn. And who are you, elf? She says she is Erwin's older sister. You can call me Terja. And out of nowhere, she stands up, saying that she has a question to ask him. Why did he ask to see a little girl so late in a tavern like this? Also, he called her last night and didn't show up. This makes her call him shameless. He's completely confused, asking how so, about last night? Are you going to play dumb now, you cheater? He quickly asks Erwin how long it's been since they left the dungeon, and she says about 30 hours. And only then does the protagonist understand that he didn't sleep for 4 or 5 hours as he thought, but rather slept for 30 hours straight. The guy is no longer the protagonist. He's a sleeping bag. He laid down and went into a coma. In his mind, it makes sense to feel so light after sleeping for an entire day. But Erwin is calm and cute, just observing the situation. Of course, he apologizes for his mistake and informs them that he slept until now, which leaves Terja completely stunned since she has never seen a barbarian apologizing before. Then she says that she didn't expect much from him, but wants to know what he wants with Erwin in this place. And he simply says that he's not obliged to tell her anything. She She gets completely furious with him, and they start arguing like crazy in front of everyone until suddenly she puts a bag with 350,000 crystals on the table, saying that's the amount Erwin earned from the essences. Then she stands there, looking, asking why he's not taking the money. She even speculates that he has another motive, as she had thought. The protagonist just asks if our little elf agrees with her sister. The deal he was going to propose was for her to help him until he reached the amount he wanted, which surprises her, asking if that's all he wanted. He even says he would split it 50-50 with her this time, which makes her completely happy but suddenly loses the excitement and immediately apologizes because from now on, she has to form a group with her sister. Then the sister starts saying that she would never let her go alone. It was only the first time because it was part of the ritual and everything, always the same excuse. Of course, this leaves the protagonist infuriated as usual, but she just pushes the bag and tells him to take the crystals if he understands. But the protagonist says that these 350,000 crystals are probably a half share according to the current price, right? And she says yes. But the protagonist says that if that's the case, 280,000 crystals are missing since the promised split was 90-10. She chuckles and says she almost forgot and literally grabs 280,000 crystals and puts them on the table. She really tried to deceive him. Now he understands why barbarians and elves hate each other, so he says that if she's done, she could leave. He needs to talk to Erwin. This leaves the sister somewhat confused, but suddenly, our elf pulls her sister by the arm, thanking her for coming and asking if she could leave since she needs to thank and say goodbye to the barbarian. The sister is impressed. It seems Erwin is growing up. Then she points to our warrior and tells him to swear, and it's to swear that he won't sleep with Erwin. If he swears, she will leave. Our elf, hearing this, blushes completely, while the protagonist wonders if he can't just sleep with her. Are the other options allowed? She keeps pointing her finger and telling him to swear, and he says he swears. I swear on my honor as a warrior! And so she was leaving the scene when she remembered something. Remembered to thank him for saving Erwin, and even called him by name. Our little elf fell with shyness, but the protagonist remained bold. When she gets up, she asks if she was too rude to her own sister. He tells her not to worry, everything will be fine. Then she thanks him for his earlier offer, but she had already decided to work with her sister a long time ago and apologizes. He just says it's okay. Then she quickly pulls out a bag with 63,000 crystals, saying it's from the crossbow guy and the toothless leader. She has already taken her share from here. She also mentions that she left the 2 backpacks at her house, and he should go there tomorrow to see for himself what's inside. He realizes that she knows everything he wants without even having to say anything. It will be sad to lose such a helpful companion. Suddenly, she asks how she should repay him. She literally wants to repay him for saving her in the dungeon, and now her sister's concern makes sense. The protagonist thinks for a bit, but can't think of anything at the moment, so he ends up asking if she wants to eat something. She says she's not hungry, so he says he'll order just for himself. Suddenly, she blushes and has the brilliant idea that she wants to have something to drink. She wants her first post-dungeon drink, and it's with the barbarian. He understands that in the game, there was something like that, and it had significant meaning for the elves. So, he says he's happy? She scolds him, saying he should say thank you, and that's what he does. He thanks her, and she happily says you're welcome. Then she says that, of course, this wouldn't be his first post-dungeon drink, but he interrupts, asking what she's talking about. This is indeed his first time too. I told you like 30 times that I was 20 years old. What, you weren't kidding? Not only that, but that was also his first time going to the dungeon. Finally, the food arrives. She says he did very well in the dungeon, and he returns the compliment. They make their first toast, and after a while, they were talking about some nonsensical things, like him wearing a shirt today, and she's wearing a skirt. He keeps turning one mug after another, which impresses her. Then he says he thought of a way for her to repay him as she wanted. All pompous, she asks what that way is, but he says it has to be somewhere else because otherwise, the security guards will come after them. She blushes and with a mischievous look asks if it can be in his room. He is completely breathless and sweating, and she is also breathless and crying, saying she can't take it anymore. I knew the barbarian was too much for her, but in reality, the protagonist was giving her a chiropractic session. As he doesn't control his strength well, he almost pulled her arm back, so she was crying, saying she couldn't take it anymore. After they finish, she thinks he was going to rip her arm off, but in reality, he was just testing her +4 flexibility status. She gets angry, asking if he called her here just to test her abilities, and he confirms that he did. He just wanted to test since the use of abilities is prohibited in the city, which disappoints her. Then he starts making a bunch of theories about the game's statistics, and had been lost in thought for some time when she pulls him, saying she's sleepy. And what I least expected happened. Unlike anime cliches, they literally slept together. Well, that took his honor as a barbarian and threw it away. I'll I'll stop here. If you like it, I can bring a continuation later. It was a lot of work to make this video with over 1 hour. At least I deserve a like, right? Thank you. And well, the video ends here. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you're new, and if you're not too,